Hey guys, tonight we're sinking softly into the candlelit corridors of a palace so enormous and secretive that it practically breathes on its own. The Forbidden City of Qing, China. Picture the sprawling red walls, the gold-tiled roofs shimmering under a timid sun, and you, a nervous, wide-eyed girl named Cixi, trudging past stone lions whose teeth you swear are clicking in judgment. You're 10 years old, barely tall enough to see over the towering gates, and your father's official robes swish behind you with every step. You can almost taste the dust of the palace courtyards as you realize this might be your new, forever home. Your childhood, while cushioned by a Banner family's privilege, doesn't feel luxurious to you at all. You're taught to sit still for hours, to memorize ancestral poems in a language you're sure the adults barely understand themselves, and to avoid the eyes of imperial eunuchs who glide like ghosts through moonlit hallways. The marble floors chill your feet even in midsummer, and you flinch every time the massive ceremonial drums pound from faraway halls. One mainstream historical fact you might not have guessed. The Forbidden City was designed with exactly 9,999 rooms, because 10,000 was the number reserved for the divine, and the emperor dared not claim heavenly perfection. But you also hear a quirkier rumor from your nursemaid, that somewhere deep inside these halls, the kitchens still serve a dessert made of lotus seeds soaked in deer milk. A concoction reserved for emperors and their favorite concubines. By age 13, you can recite classic Confucian texts backwards if needed. But what you really want is to climb the courtyard walls to glimpse the outside world. Historians still argue whether your early years were sheltered enough to make you naive, or so stifling they honed your survival instincts to a razor's edge. One night, as you lie awake in your small, lacquered bed, you hear the slow beat of a watchman's gong counting out the night hours. It sounds oddly like a giant's heartbeat, lulling you toward sleep, but also reminding you of the unbending rhythm of palace life. You dream of the day when you'll wear the silk gowns you see swishing past your doorway and leave behind the itchy, plain clothes of a girl with no title. Every day, your lessons with court tutors leave you bleary-eyed. You learn the subtle art of calligraphy, how to cast a polite smile that doesn't reveal your real thoughts, and the complex etiquette of tea ceremonies where everyone's status is measured by who pours first. You note who bows slightly too late, who glances at forbidden faces, and who smirks behind closed fans. Details that will one day save your life. When you're finally allowed into the outer gardens, you sneak peeks at older girls with hair pinned in elaborate loops, candidates for the emperor's next round of consort selections. You wonder if their smiles are genuine or practiced. The scent of sweet osmanthus hangs heavy in the air, making your head spin with excitement and dread. At dinner, you sit straight-backed at a lacquer table so polished you see your reflection in every dish. Your father recites his official reports from the Ministry of Works, his words thick with bureaucratic jargon, while you pick at rice and wonder what it's like to wield real power. Your mother watches you quietly, her gaze flickering with unspoken warnings. Each meal is a lesson in silence. Days stretch into months, and you grow into a slender teenager with eyes sharper than the jeweled hairpins you secretly admire. You've memorized every turn of the palace corridors, every hidden door a servant uses to slip unseen between chambers. You've also memorized which aunties gossip about imperial mistresses after the evening lanterns are lit. A light joke comes to mind as you spot a giant carp leaping in the palace pond. If only you could swim away like it, you think, but then again, you'd probably get caught and turned into dinner. There's a particular afternoon you won't forget. A sudden thunderstorm sweeps over the city, turning its rooftops into slick rivers. You stand at the edge of a pavilion, watching the rain wash dragon-shaped tiles into gleaming obsidian. In that moment, you realize the emperor you might one day serve is but a mortal under heaven's storms, just like you. Meanwhile, a new hush falls over your family. Imperial messengers have started calling noble daughters to Beijing for the next consort selection, a once-in-a-decade event that will transform some girls into empresses, others into forgotten footnotes. You feel your heartbeat echo in your ears. You know the day you've both dreaded and dreamed of is coming. Your sleep grows restless, your dreams more vivid. Some nights, you see yourself wearing a crown of phoenixes. Other nights, you watch yourself fade into the shadows of endless halls. The palace feels less like a home and more like a labyrinth plotting your destiny. And as dawn slips through your paper windows, you can almost hear the imperial drums calling you forward. You wake to a chill that bites through the thickest blankets the palace seamstresses could stitch. Today is the day of the imperial selection, a day so momentous that even the eunuchs sweep the halls with an extra flourish. You're not alone. Dozens of young women in silk shoes whisper prayers as they glide toward the hall of supreme harmony. The morning mist curls between crimson columns like a dragon refusing to leave. Your heart pounds against your ribs as you're led into a grand chamber filled with the scent of polished sandalwood and the low hum of courtiers murmuring titles. Above you loom painted ceilings alive with golden clouds, each one promising glory or ruin. You try not to imagine how many of these girls will leave the Forbidden City tonight with nothing but tears in their sleeves. The selection exam is a trial in itself. A line of imperial officials evaluates every candidate's posture, diction, embroidery, poetry recitation, and even the steadiness of her eyes. Each test feels like walking across a frozen lake. One slip, and you're done. You recite verses from the Book of Songs, while a bored prince scribbles notes you'll never see. You smile serenely when asked which flower best represents feminine virtue. Peony, of course, you purr. Mainstream historical fact. The selection of imperial concubines wasn't just about beauty. It was a bureaucratic process regulated by laws specifying which banners could present daughters, ensuring the Manchu ruling class preserved their bloodlines. Yet, there's a quirkier detail too. Legend says one official would discreetly note who sweated under pressure, convinced nervous glistening revealed a deceitful heart. As you stand perfectly still in your jade green gown, you catch sight of an older concubine assessing you from the shadows. Her lips quirk upward, half amused, half pitying, as if she's already envisioned your entire future. And she's not impressed. Historians still argue whether these selections were truly impartial or if bribes and secret recommendations from eunuchs swayed the emperor's choices. You're ushered to a smaller chamber for final scrutiny. The Empress Dowager herself sits behind a bead curtain, her silhouette barely visible. A single cough from her is enough to hush every voice in the room. You don't dare look up, but you feel her presence, heavy as thunderclouds. When your name is called, and you're told you will join the ranks of low-level concubines, you force yourself to breathe slowly, gracefully, as if this were exactly what you expected. A joke flutters in your mind. You're officially in the world's most exclusive dormitory, but there's no midnight gossip allowed. The other selected girls shift nervously, some stifling sobs behind fans. You realize you're not the only one already mourning the carefree days of your youth. In your new quarters, the scent of fresh ink and rice paper soothes you as servants bustle to unpack your sparse belongings. The room's single window reveals a sliver of the inner court's gardens. But your days of exploring them freely are over. From now on, you'll await summonses and live by the rigid schedule of palace life. Meals arrive in brass-tiered boxes you're expected to eat in silence. You memorize the subtle signals. Which knock means a servant is entering. Which bell means a higher-ranked consort is passing nearby. At night, you lie awake wondering which of the other girls is already scheming for favor. And how many years it might take before your own name reaches the Emperor's ears. When you're finally summoned to an audience with him weeks later, your feet go numb with fear. You glide down hallways lit by oil lamps, whose flames dance like mischievous spirits, casting shapes of tigers and dragons across your path. As you kneel before the Son of Heaven, you feel like an insect under a magnifying glass. His face betrays no emotion as his gaze sweeps over you, yet he nods. That nod, barely perceptible to anyone else, sends a jolt of both relief and terror through your bones. You sense you've passed an invisible test. When you return to your room, you replay every blink, every word, every swallow from that meeting, searching for clues to your future. And when dawn breaks over the palace rooftops the next morning, the crows perched on gilded gates caw as if laughing at your helplessness. You realize you've officially entered a game of survival where the stakes are life, death, and the fate of an empire you're still trying to understand. Remember how, as a girl, you longed to see the world beyond those walls? Now, you understand. You're trapped deeper inside them than you ever imagined. Morning sun spills through latticed windows, striping your bed with golden bars that look suspiciously like prison bars. But today, the world inside those bars shifts forever. You're told you're pregnant. A hush thicker than Beijing's summer humidity falls across your quarters. Servants avert their eyes, older concubines stiffen with jealousy. And suddenly you, a low-ranked girl from the Yehenara clan, hold the single most precious currency in the entire Qing dynasty, a future heir. Your belly grows rounder as spring turns to summer, and you're pampered in ways you never dreamed. The kitchen sends delicate bird's nest soup and fresh lychees. Silk robes embroidered with phoenixes arrive unbidden. But along with these luxuries come suspicious glances. The palace rumor mill whirs like a prayer wheel. Who is the father's favorite now? Who stands to gain? And who must be cut down? You spend long afternoons tracing the lacquered vines on your furniture, imagining the tiny kicks inside you as both a promise and a curse. Mainstream historical fact. Your son's birth instantly elevated your status to noble consort Yi, a rank so powerful it often rivaled the Empress herself. In an empire where sons guaranteed the mother's influence, your life transformed overnight. Quirkier detail. Palace midwives still believed powdered pearls mixed with hot wine ensured a painless birth. So you drink the gritty concoction, grimacing with every sip, suspecting it's just an excuse to keep you compliant. Historians still argue whether these rituals offered real protection or were tools of control designed by a paranoid court. When the labor begins, the forbidden city feels unnaturally still. The thunder of ceremonial drums from distant halls pulses like a heartbeat for your baby's arrival. You bite down on a silk cloth, trying not to scream. Somewhere beyond your closed doors, the emperor paces, calculating the future of his dynasty with every contraction you suffer. Hours later, you cradle your newborn son. His cries pierce the hush, sharp and strong. You feel dizzy with relief and fear. Palace servants rush to announce the birth, their footsteps slapping against polished stones. When the emperor arrives, his expression softens ever so slightly. He declares the child, the Tongzhi emperor's heir apparent. You bow low, your knees bruising against cold marble, knowing that your son's fragile existence now binds your fate to the empire itself. That night, you don't sleep. You lie awake, watching shadows of plum branches sway across your ceiling. You wonder if the emperor's affection will last, or if new rivals will rise like weeds. Every creak in the corridor makes you flinch. You tuck your baby tighter against you, as if your arms alone could shield him from the ambitions swirling beyond your doors. Your sense of humor flickers, even here. You muse that for all the grandeur, palace life boils down to endless diapers, suspicious aunts, and etiquette that makes modern office politics look like kindergarten. The next morning, your world expands and contracts at once. Eunuchs address you with deeper bows. Servants anticipate your every whim, but also record your every move. The Empress, childless herself, sends you a jade bracelet, a gift that feels colder than the stone itself. By winter, you learn to hide your triumph behind serene eyes. You practice veiling your glee because every display of emotion is a weakness someone can exploit. As you walk the covered corridors with your son swaddled in embroidered quilts, you note who steps aside with true respect and who hesitates just long enough to betray a flicker of resentment. Your palace tutors now teach you more than poetry and propriety. They drill you in palace protocol, dynastic history, and the balance of power among clans. At night, you repeat names and alliances under your breath like a mantra, knowing you must master these if you and your son are to survive. Remember that thunderstorm you once watched as a child? Now you realize you're not merely beneath the storm. You are the storm, or at least its gathering clouds. Historians still argue whether the emperor's favoritism was love or a cold calculation to secure the dynasty. But as your son begins to giggle and reach for your face, you know your love for him is the one truth in the web of palace lies. And every morning you wake, you sense the walls listening as you whisper lullabies that promise him a future you'll do anything to protect. Your son's soft baby breath still clings to your silk robes when the world tilts again. The emperor, once your cautious protector, falls ill with a mysterious fever. Whispers ripple through the palace like icy drafts. Some say he was poisoned. Others blame restless ancestors. All you know is that every cough echoes through the halls like a death knell. By the time his cheeks grow hollow, the emperor barely leaves his bed. His once keen eyes now glaze over the golden screens, missing the flutter of worried servants and the terrified stares of courtiers plotting their next moves. You spend hours kneeling by his side, murmuring soothing words, but your heart pounds with every labored breath he takes. A mainstream historical fact that few realize. Emperor Xianfeng's health truly declined after China's humiliating defeats during the Second Opium War. A blow to imperial prestige that weighed heavily on him. Yet, there's a quirkier tidbit you overhear from gossipy handmaidens. A monk once told the emperor eating raw ginseng would cure him, so he chewed it bitterly until his teeth ached. Historians still argue whether his sudden deterioration was hastened by palace factions eager to end his reign, or simply the relentless stress of a crumbling empire. You spend long days weaving between desperation and calculation. Each morning brings new petitions, urgent messages from war fronts, and ministers demanding decisions the emperor can no longer give. Eunuchs tiptoe around you, their silence thicker than the incense smoke curling through sick rooms. Every time you press a damp cloth to your husband's burning forehead, you wonder if you'll next cradle a corpse. Meanwhile, palace routines turn surreal. Ceremonial meals arrive like clockwork, even as the emperor lies unable to eat. Court musicians practice festive pieces in distant courtyards to maintain an illusion of stability, their flutes a mocking soundtrack to your sleepless nights. One morning, while adjusting his robes, you catch the emperor's hand reaching for yours. His fingers tremble, his gaze sharp for the first time in days. He rasps a single sentence, naming you mother of the future emperor. It's both an honor and a chain around your neck. A joke flashes through your weary mind. Congratulations, you've just won the worst prize in the world. As his breathing grows shallower, rumors race faster than any horse. Some predict a regency split between powerful men. Others swear the empress will claim absolute control. You sense daggers hidden behind every polite bow. On the day the emperor's jade seal passes from his hands, the palace becomes eerily quiet, like the entire forbidden city is holding its breath. The emperor slips away in the pre-dawn darkness, his final exhale so soft you almost miss it. Yet outside, watchmen beat drums announcing the end of an era. Your son, barely a toddler, becomes the Tongji emperor that morning. His cries punctuate the dawn, mingling with the cawing of palace crows. You carry him in your arms to the hall of mental cultivation. Every step echoing across marble floors that feel colder than ever before. Remember those endless etiquette lessons? Now, they are your armor as you kneel before the Council of Regents. They bow to your son, but their eyes flicker with schemes. You feel the weight of their gaze, measuring how easily they can manipulate a grieving mother. The forbidden city's walls close in tighter. Messages from the 8 banners, the powerful Manchu military clans, arrive with subtle threats. You learn which princes have ambitions beyond loyalty, and which allies might sell you for a whiff of power. Historians still argue whether the emperor's deathbed decree naming you as co-regent with Empress Qian was a heartfelt wish or a desperate bid to preserve the dynasty. By moonlight, you stand on the white jade bridge over the palace's grand moat, the water black and still. You whisper promises to the spirits of your ancestors, vowing your son will not become a puppet, even if it means daring moves that would make your younger self's knees buckle. As night deepens, your son stirs restlessly in his cradle, and you sit by his side, knowing dawn will bring demands you can no longer ignore. The emperor is dead. Long live the emperor. Except you're the one who must keep that declaration from turning hollow. Dawn's pale light slices through your chambers like a blade. Today, your new title is no mere honorific. It's a shield and a target all at once. You, once a girl trembling at court etiquette, are now Dowager Empress Cixi, co-regent of a sprawling empire. Yet, every bow you receive from ministers feels slippery, every polite smile an invitation to betrayal. The first order of business, the regency itself. While Emperor Xianfeng's will declared both you and Empress Qian regents, a council of 8 elder statesmen, the so-called 8 regents, seizes control, assuming you'll meekly serve as ceremonial figureheads. But you're no longer the frightened concubine memorizing flower poems. You're the mother of the Son of Heaven, and you intend to act like it. Your initial days in power are spent wrapped in the suffocating decorum of court rituals. Layers of black mourning silk weigh you down, but your eyes remain sharp above your funeral veil. Courtiers discuss troop deployments and trade deficits, ignoring you as if you were the palace cat. Yet every word is filed away in your mind, each rival noted for the reckoning you plan. Mainstream historical fact, the 8 regents' conservative grip sought to stall any reforms or power shifts after Xianfeng's death, stifling voices who warned that China's humiliations at the hands of Western powers demanded modernization. Quirkier detail. In your private hours, you commission a secret embroidery of a dragon devouring 8 tiny frogs. An unsubtle joke you allow only your closest attendants to glimpse. Historians still argue whether your decision to strike at the regents was a carefully laid plan from the day of Xianfeng's death, or a desperate gamble born of palace pressure. Either way, you know the first step is winning over Prince Gong, the emperor's ambitious half-brother. He commands respect among progressive officials and has influence with the bannermen. An alliance with him could tilt the balance. A joke slides through your mind when you meet Prince Gong in a candlelit side room. You think he's either your savior or the second snake in Eden, but you'll smile sweetly until you find out which. You spend tense weeks exchanging cryptic letters, all the while attending stiff court councils where the 8 regents speak over you. You feign polite indifference, even as your rage burns like coals. Your son gurgles happily in your lap during audiences, oblivious to the power plays swirling around his every breath. One cold October night, your plan crystallizes. You and Empress Qian, a woman as quietly calculating as yourself, convene in a secret meeting. The 2 of you strike an uneasy but necessary alliance. Together, you'll overthrow the 8 regents. You can't help but recall the day you first glimpsed Xian's silhouette behind her bead curtain. Who knew you'd one day conspire with that same shadow? The coup is swift. As morning fog shrouds the forbidden city, your loyal bannermen storm the residences of the regents. By the time the sun rises, 6 are imprisoned, 2 executed. You sweep into the Hall of Supreme Harmony with your toddler son nestled against your chest, and a hush falls over every official. In that instant, there's no mistaking who holds the empire's reins. Historians still argue whether your coup saved China from stagnation or condemned it to an even more chaotic future. But as you seat yourself beside Empress Qian on twin thrones, an unprecedented sight in Qing history, you know only one thing. You've survived. And for now, so has your son's reign. Remember the scent of sweet osmanthus drifting through the gardens when you were a girl? Today that fragrance lingers again on the breeze, as if the palace itself sighs with relief or fear. That evening, you gaze across Beijing's rooftops lit by thousands of lanterns. A city unaware of the silent war just won in its heart. Yet, you can't allow yourself to celebrate. The court is purged, but the empire beyond the walls remains restless. Foreign warships lurk off the coasts, and rebellions smolder in distant provinces. Your real work has only just begun. The air inside the Forbidden City feels both lighter and more dangerous now. With the 8 regents gone, you and Empress Qian sit side by side as twin centers of gravity. 2 women sharing the weight of an empire. Yet, even as you exchange polite smiles, you sense cracks forming under the surface. You know alliances born of necessity rarely survive the first taste of victory. Your mornings are now spent in exhausting councils. You pore over petitions, imperial edicts, and intelligence reports detailing bandit raids, silver shortages, and rumors of insurrection. By mid-afternoon, your eyes ache from squinting at dense columns of classical Chinese characters, but you dare not show weakness. Every flicker of fatigue is ammunition for those who already whisper that women cannot rule. Mainstream historical fact. In the early years of co-regency, you and Xian presented a remarkably unified front, maintaining harmony by jointly issuing decrees and appearing at ceremonies together. Yet the truth was more delicate. Both of you navigated a minefield of clashing clans and palace factions. A quirkier tidbit: palace records suggest you and Qian occasionally engaged in subtle competitions. Who could commission the more elegant hairpin? Whose silk gowns won more approving glances at court? These rivalries, though petty to outsiders, mirrored deeper currents of power. Historians still argue whether Empress Xian genuinely wanted to share authority or merely tolerated you as a necessary evil. Your toddler son, now recognized officially as the Tongji Emperor, toddles through palace gardens, blissfully unaware that every step he takes shifts the empire's destiny. You hold his tiny hand during court processions, knowing each public appearance strengthens your position. One evening, as the 2 of you share a tense tea ceremony, you catch Qian's gaze lingering on your son. Her eyes soften. Was it sympathy, longing for a child of her own, or the cool calculation of a rival? You joke to yourself that palace life turns every kind gesture into a potential chess move. Meanwhile, you attend elaborate banquets meant to showcase imperial stability. Eunuchs carry towers of shimmering fish roe and delicate jellied meats past bowing officials. Lanterns sway in the courtyard breeze, casting shadows that look suspiciously like crouching tigers waiting for a misstep. Remember how you once feared the Empress's silhouette behind her curtain? Now, you share a table with that same woman, your conversations studded with honeyed words and hidden blades. Each day you try to read the flickers of doubt in her eyes as carefully as you once studied the brushstrokes of your calligraphy lessons. You both face an empire battered by rebellions. Reports from the southwest describe the Miao and Panthe uprisings in Guizhou and Yunnan. Farther west, rumors swirl of Muslim revolts that could drag the court into fresh chaos. Together, you sign edicts calling for suppression, but you feel Qian's hesitation. She favors caution. You crave decisive action. Mainstream historians debate if these differences were philosophical or personal. Did Qian believe in moderation, or did she simply fear you'd gain too much glory by crushing rebellions? You begin to build your own network of loyalists, weaving friendships with powerful generals and capable ministers who report directly to you. Late at night, you host secret dinners in the quieter halls of the summer palace, speaking softly with men who will one day be your hammer against dissent. One night, as a cold wind rattles palace shutters, You sense the Empress's resolve weakening. She seems distracted, her once commanding presence reduced to polite nods. And though you comfort her with gentle words, you know your patience is a blade pressed to the neck of fate. Remember those palace fountains you admired as a girl? Now you study their stone carp spouting endless streams of water, imagining the persistence it takes to wear down even the hardest obstacles. You resolve to become like that water, relentless, silent, and unstoppable. As you drift off to a fitful sleep, you dream of your son seated on a golden throne, grown strong and wise. Yet shadows gather behind him, and you wake with a start, knowing your alliance with Qian might be the only thing keeping those shadows at bay for now. Days lengthen into years, and as your son grows, so does your sense of urgency. The empire feels like it's perched on a crumbling ledge. Western powers press harder with every treaty. Rebellions keep flaring, and whispers of China's backwardness ripple through even the innermost halls of the Forbidden City. You, Empress Dowager Cixi, decide it's time for cautious but necessary change. Mainstream historical fact. Under your co-regency, China launched the self-strengthening movement, a hesitant effort to adopt Western technology, especially modern weapons and shipyards, while preserving Confucian governance. Yet, you never intended to imitate foreigners wholesale. Your goal was always to reinforce imperial power. A quirky tidbit that always makes you smirk. One of your earliest modernizations was the purchase of a steam-powered paddle boat decorated with gaudy dragons. More pleasure cruiser than warship. Promptly mocked by Western diplomats who watched it belch smoke as it lurched down the river. Historians still argue whether you truly believed in modernization or merely saw it as a tool to prop up your family's rule. Even you sometimes wonder, staring into candle flames late at night, if all this tinkering will be enough to hold back a world hurtling toward a new age. Your days now revolve around meetings with generals who champion new rifles, translators who introduce foreign manuals, and cautious ministers who remind you too much change could spark conservative backlash. Each conversation feels like threading a needle over a yawning abyss. Remember the stone carp fountains you admired? You start imagining them spewing not just water, but artillery shells. Another sign you're seeing the empire in a new, more ruthless light. Between councils, you steal moments to watch your son practice calligraphy. His small hands tremble as he draws sprawling characters, each one a struggle between childish impatience and imperial duty. You correct his posture, but a part of you aches. He should be playing outside, not learning the delicate brushstrokes of political survival. Meanwhile, you face daily reminders that some courtiers hate your reforms. They mutter that steamships and telegraphs are harbingers of foreign devils. They call you a foolish woman trying to be a man. But you remember your father's cold stares when you were small. You know how to withstand contempt. One afternoon, you host foreign envoys in the summer palace. They arrive in starchy uniforms, their mustaches twitching as they bow awkwardly. You keep your face serene as they present strange gifts. Mechanical clocks, delicate glassware, and firearms they claim are the best in the civilized world. You politely admire each item while assessing how easily they could be turned against you. Mainstream historical fact. Your court established the Tongwen Guan, China's first formal foreign language school, hiring Western teachers to instruct Manchu and Han students in English, French, and scientific subjects. It's a tiny but momentous crack in the walls of tradition. That night, walking the covered corridors between your private quarters and the audience halls, you watch bats flutter above the tiled roofs. You joke to yourself that the bats must think humans are idiots for staying up so late debating whether ironclads are worth the cost. Your personal chambers grow more ornate as your power consolidates. Elaborate wall hangings depict dragons, phoenixes, and fierce tigers, symbols of your authority. You start to feel at home amidst the cold marble and priceless bronzes, even as you wonder if your reforms will cement your legacy or bury it. Yet, you never let your son see your doubts. You teach him to nod solemnly when officials present petitions, to remain silent when others bicker, and to smile only when it serves a purpose. Historians still argue whether you molded him into an emperor or stunted him into a timid figurehead. The empire beyond your palace walls begins to hum with new inventions. Telegraph wires stretch between cities, factories belch smoke in treaty ports, and Chinese merchants experiment with Western accounting ledgers. Change spreads slowly, unevenly, like ink soaking into silk. Beautiful, but unpredictable. As dawn breaks on yet another day of delicate negotiations and hushed conspiracies, you gaze over the lotus ponds of the summer palace, whispering to yourself a vow. You will not let China slip quietly into the night, even if it means redefining what it means to rule. Sunlight slants through the latticework of your summer palace, splintering across jade balustrades and rippling pools of koi. Here, far from the rigid corridors of the Forbidden City, you find a space to think and to indulge. This palace, an imperial playground on the edge of Beijing, is where you orchestrate both the grandeur of the dynasty and the subtle flex of your personal power. Mainstream historical fact. During your regency, you oversaw an ambitious restoration of the summer palace after it was devastated by foreign troops in the Second Opium War. Your reconstruction expanded the sprawling gardens, rebuilt ornate pavilions, and created longevity hills meandering pathways. Quirkier detail? You ordered the construction of the famed Marble Boat, a 2-story lakeside pavilion that looked like a floating stone ship, complete with painted wheels, yet incapable of sailing an inch. Historians still argue whether the Marble Boat was a bold symbol of enduring power or an ironic metaphor for a dynasty stuck in place. You spend mornings walking those winding stone paths, feeling the cool mist drift from Kunming Lake. Lotus blossoms brush your fingertips. Peacocks strut along the banks, their feathers shimmering like imperial banners. You entertain visiting dignitaries on shaded terraces, each dish of preserved plums or roast duck a carefully chosen message. China can be gracious, but never weak. Afternoons often dissolve into languid tea ceremonies. You watch the swirl of steam above delicate porcelain cups. Let the slow pour of oolong set the pace of conversations, where everything is implied and nothing is spoken plainly. A joke curls through your thoughts. Wouldn't European monarchs drop dead of impatience if they had to negotiate at the speed of a Beijing tea ceremony? Evenings bring grand banquets under lanterns that swing gently in warm breezes. Musicians pluck pipa strings while dragon boats drift across the lake, lanterns glinting on black water. Every detail, every performance is both celebration and lesson, reminding guests, both foreign and domestic, who controls the empire's beating heart. Meanwhile, rumors seep into your moonlit nights. Critics accuse you of extravagance. Some claim the funds rebuilding the summer palace should have gone to strengthening coastal defenses. You read these missives in your private study, unruffled, then gently fold the letters into the flames of your brazier. Historians still argue whether your lavish tastes were reckless or a savvy exercise in projecting stability during an age of turmoil. You know only this: an empire that looks weak invites wolves. In quiet moments, you recline in silk cushions overlooking the lake, letting the soft call of night herons lull your thoughts. You remember the cramped bed of your childhood quarters in the Forbidden City, the fear of each passing footstep. Here, the air smells of pine and chrysanthemum, and you allow yourself a rare feeling: contentment. Your son toddles along the white stone bridges, giggling at turtles sunning themselves. Servants trail discreetly behind, ready to scoop him up should he stumble. You laugh softly, a sound that surprises even you, knowing each of his steps is another reminder of why you cling to power. The summer palace becomes your second court, where decisions shaping provinces and lives are made over mooncakes and jasmine tea. Remember how, as a teenager, you studied who bowed too low or smiled too quickly. Now, you host ministers and generals on floating pavilions, testing their loyalties with offhand questions and the precise tilt of your head. One warm evening, as pink clouds swirl over Kunming Lake, you watch fireworks bloom like peonies in the sky. Guests cheer, but you stay silent, measuring which officials' eyes light up with childish delight and which flicker with calculation. The marble boat sits motionless nearby, lit by lanterns that paint its stone hull in shifting shades. You wonder if future historians will see you in the same light, impervious, magnificent, and doomed to remain forever still. As night deepens and the stars scatter across black water, you whisper promises to yourself in the hush of the gardens. Promises to protect your son, to preserve the dynasty, and to carve your name into a history that might otherwise forget you. A restless wind sweeps in from the steppes, rattling the bamboo blinds of your palace rooms. You know that beyond the serene lakes of your summer palace and the gilded halls of Beijing, a storm is brewing. One made of desperate peasants, swelling rebellions, and foreign demands sharper than any sword. If the empire is your stage, then rebellions are the discordant drumbeats threatening to drown your careful symphony. Reports arrive daily on crisp rice paper. In the provinces, starving farmers rise up against corrupt officials. Bandit armies grow bold, torching villages and seizing tax shipments. Some wear tattered uniforms from the Taiping and Neon uprisings, proof that the scars of past civil wars haven't healed. Mainstream historical fact: even after the Taiping Rebellion ended in 1864, pockets of resistance lingered for years, stoking fears of new uprisings just as the court struggled to modernize. A quirkier tidbit you savor on sleepless nights: rebels often invoked slogans claiming divine visions from the Jade Emperor himself, meaning they had celestial permission to ransack anyone who disagreed. Historians still argue whether these visions were cynical ploys to recruit believers or the genuine delusions of desperate men. You respond with urgency. Dispatch after dispatch carries your orders. Generals must deploy fresh troops. Governors must root out conspirators. Rice stores must be distributed to calm hungry bellies. You send secret letters to trusted commanders who report directly to you, bypassing bureaucrats who might delay or sabotage your efforts. Remember that first time you knelt trembling before the emperor as a concubine? Now, regional officials tremble before you, their knees stiffening on cold marble floors as you interrogate them on lost revenues and suspiciously quiet counties. Meanwhile, Western envoys press their advantage. French, British, Russian, and later German representatives arrive with treaty demands, their eyes gleaming with visions of new ports and railway concessions. They present trade proposals thick with legalese, but thinly veiled threats. You keep your voice soft and your face serene. But inside, you see that each new humiliation carved into China's sovereignty. Mainstream fact, the aftermath of the Second Opium War and the unequal treaties left China paying heavy indemnities and ceding key ports, creating a bitter sense of national weakness. Yet you also spot opportunities, realizing that Western arms, ships, and industrial techniques might help China claw back power. If only you could control their spread. In late-night councils, you and Empress Tian listen to generals describing peasant armies overrunning market towns. Some suggest appeasement. You advocate swift, merciless crackdowns. Your debates turn icy. Your alliance with Xi'an now strained by differences over how to quell the empire's unrest. You start noticing her absences at meetings, her vague excuses delivered by cautious servants. Remember that jade bracelet she once gave you after your son's birth? You find yourself fingering it during tense councils, wondering if it was a token of sisterhood or the opening gambit of a lifelong game. One morning, as dawn fog creeps through Vermilion gates, word arrives of a rebellion in Yunnan. Muslim Hui forces have seized prefectures, declaring their own kingdom. The empire's mountain frontiers are aflame. You gather your ministers before the lacquered map table, your finger tracing the twisting rivers of the southwest as you bark orders like a battlefield commander. You also work to reassure the people, issuing proclamations promising tax relief and punishment for corrupt magistrates. You know fear is a blunt instrument. Hope, properly wielded, cuts deeper. Remember the slow, stilted poetry recitations of your girlhood. Now, you compose fiery edicts calling upon Confucian values of loyalty and harmony, hoping to rouse even the most indifferent peasant into supporting the throne. Historians still argue whether your dual approach, combining military repression with calculated reforms, bought the dynasty precious time or merely delayed inevitable collapse. But you don't have the luxury of hindsight. You act because you must, and because every heartbeat of your son's future depends on it. As evening falls, you stand on your palace terrace watching fires burn beyond the city walls, their orange glow pulsing like a second sunset. You know these flames are both danger and opportunity, and you vow, as you slip back inside to plan tomorrow's orders, that you will shape them before they consume everything. The weight of rebellion and foreign encroachment hangs heavy over the court, yet just as you think you've tamed the swirling chaos, a fresh tempest rises, one born not on distant frontiers, but in the marble halls of your own palace. It begins with your adopted son, the Guangxu Emperor, who grows from a shy, delicate boy into a young man brimming with radical dreams. Mainstream historical fact: by 1898, your nephew Guangxu, officially enthroned as emperor with your backing, launched the 100 Days Reform, a whirlwind of modernization proposals, including new schools, reorganized ministries, and Western-style industrial plans. But the quirkier detail, one you note with a weary eye, is that his chief advisor, Kang Yu-wei, was said to preach reform with the zeal of a street magician, drawing starstruck young officials into late-night meetings where they scribbled plans to upend centuries of tradition in mere weeks. Historians still argue whether the Guangxu emperor acted of his own will or was manipulated by cunning reformers eager to seize control from both you and the entrenched Manchu elite. You watch these events unfold like a pot boiling over. At first, you humor Guangxu's enthusiasm, even quietly admire his passion. But soon, his decrees begin arriving without your review. Sweeping orders dissolving outdated exams, cutting bureaucracies, and threatening your most loyal ministers. His supporters speak of saving China, but you hear an echo of rebellion in their voices. Remember those delicate negotiations you once conducted over jasmine tea? Now, ministers scurry into your chambers with eyes wide and voices hushed, describing frantic orders flooding the provinces. They beg you to restore stability before the empire shatters into open civil war. You weigh your options carefully. Could you compromise, allow Guangxu to share authority? Or was that naivety in a palace where hesitation often meant death? The night you decide, you sit alone in your private study. Candle flames sputter in the autumn draft. You recall every slight, every betrayal since your teenage years, every time mercy led only to regret. Your plan moves faster than a monsoon. Loyal troops encircle the emperor's quarters. His favorite reformers scatter or are arrested. By sunrise, Guangxu himself is a prisoner, confined to the hall of imperial peace, a gilded cage of polished floors and silk curtains, but a cage nonetheless. Mainstream historical fact: Guangxu's house arrest would last until his death, and your reassertion of control killed the 100 Days Reform after just 103 days. A darkly funny thought crosses your mind. If the reformers had spent 100 days planning instead of acting, they might have lasted more than a season. In the days following your coup, you issue edicts clarifying your intent. China will modernize, but carefully, without abandoning its core traditions. Ministers return to your side, relief etched across their weary faces. Some provinces celebrate the end of reforms that threatened their comfortable positions. Others mourn the lost chance to pull China into the modern world. Historians still argue whether you crushed reform because you feared it, or because you feared chaos. In truth, you see little difference. Chaos is chaos. Whether it arrives waving foreign flags or waving promises of utopia. Remember how the watchman's gong once lulled you to sleep as a girl. Now, its midnight toll echoes in your private chambers, counting down not childhood dreams, but the dwindling days of an empire you're determined to keep intact. Through the tall windows of your audience hall, you gaze at the distant flicker of Beijing's lanterns, a city asleep and oblivious to the battle just fought in their name. You know your actions tonight will ripple far beyond the palace walls. As dawn's first light spills across the polished tiles, you stand over a map of China's provinces, vowing that even if reform must wait, you will do everything in your power to ensure there's still a China left to save. Cold winds whistle through the eaves of the Forbidden City as you pace the silent halls, the stone floors reflecting your unwavering determination. Your nephew Guangxu is a ghost emperor now, alive but unseen, his voice smothered by the weight of your control. Yet, even as you tighten your grip, whispers slip through cracks in the walls. Reformists plot in shadows, foreign eyes gleam at every sign of weakness, and your court stands divided between those who hail you as China's protector and those who curse you as its greatest obstacle. Your days become a pattern of sharp-edged routine. Mornings spent reading dense reports from the provinces, afternoons dissecting intelligence on both local rebels and foreign movements, evenings questioning ministers about plots hatched under lantern light. Every conversation is a dance. Every compliment conceals a threat. Mainstream historical fact. After Guangxu's house arrest, you established a network of loyal eunuchs and bannermen to monitor every corner of the palace, turning the Forbidden City into a maze of eyes and ears that funneled every secret back to you. Quirkier detail, one of your most trusted informants, known only by his nickname, the Whistling Sparrow, was rumored to slip tiny scrolls of intelligence into hollowed-out hairpins delivered to your dressing table. Historians still argue whether this story is fact or embellishment by later chroniclers fascinated with palace intrigue. Meanwhile, your adopted son lives under virtual house arrest in the Hall of Imperial Peace. At times, he's allowed to read, write poetry, or gaze out over the palace garden. But his movements are watched, his letters opened, his words weighed. Remember the nights you once spent wide-eyed, dreaming of escape from palace walls? Now, you realize you've become the architect of walls stronger than any you ever feared as a girl. You also face a growing crisis of legitimacy. Reform-minded intellectuals flee Beijing, their pamphlets denouncing your tyranny spreading like wildfire. Foreign ambassadors arrive with polite smiles, hiding deep scorn. They treat your government as a relic, a joke delaying the inevitable march of Western progress. You keep your composure, but each snub tastes like acid on your tongue. Your ministers argue over policy in your presence, but their debates ring hollow. You know the real power lives in your decree alone. Some nights, you catch your reflection in black lacquered screens. The serene face of China's Dowager Empress stares back at you, but behind the calm eyes, you see the exhaustion of a woman who spent decades outmaneuvering rivals. Remember those feasts at the summer palace? The floating lanterns and playful laughter? Now, your banquets are stiff affairs. Conversation stays fixed on politics, and you watch for signs of shifting alliances in the way courtiers sip tea or avoid your gaze. The music sounds thin, the dancers' silk fans fluttering like trapped moths. Mainstream historical fact. Even after seizing full power, you continued select modernization efforts, like supporting military academies, establishing a navy, and authorizing some telegraph lines. Yet progress lagged, bogged down by corruption, tradition, and fear of provoking revolt among conservative factions. In the rare, quiet hours, you drift through private gardens, the scent of autumn chrysanthemums hanging heavy in the air. You whisper half-remembered poems about loyalty and fate, knowing historians will someday dissect your every move. A joke flickers across your mind. If you could read those future histories now, maybe you'd find out whether all this scheming was worth it. At dusk, you stand by your son's locked quarters, feeling both pity and icy resolve. You remember his bright eyes as a child and wonder if they've dulled from isolation. You recall your own fears when first entering these walls, how you vowed to seize every chance to survive. Now, you've given him no such chance. Historians still argue whether you were a devoted guardian who sacrificed everything for the dynasty, or a ruthless usurper unable to share power, as you slip into bed beneath layers of embroidered quilts, you decide you don't care what they'll write. You care only that China lives another day, and that your son's existence keeps your enemies guessing. Each dawn, crimson sunlight spills across the golden water river, glinting off roof tiles like dragon scales. But in your private chambers, mourning means more than beauty. It signals another day to assert your will, secure alliances, and savor every shred of power you fought so hard to keep. You've learned to embrace the grandeur that others call decadence. In these years of late-life glory, you cultivate an image of the indomitable Empress Dowager, swathed in silks that rustle like thunder. Mainstream historical fact: your court became a magnet for foreign dignitaries, artists, and industrialists, who marveled at both the opulence and the paradox of a woman ruling a faltering empire. You received gifts like German clocks with dancing figures, French perfume bottles shaped like pagodas, and American phonographs playing tinny opera arias. A quirkier tidbit? You developed an obsession with taking daily portraits in new robes, posing in elaborate dragon-embroidered gowns, tilting your head just so to project regal serenity. Some photographers whispered that you demanded retakes if the gold thread didn't gleam exactly right. Historians still argue whether this late-life pageantry was vanity or a calculated performance to awe both your subjects and foreign powers. You suspect it was both, and why not? In an empire where appearances shape reality, you make yourself a legend before others can write you as a footnote. Even your daily routines grow theatrical. You rise before sunrise to let handmaids massage your temples with fragrant oils. Then don ceremonial headdresses so tall they shadow your face like watchtowers. Breakfasts arrive in towers of lacquered boxes, sweet lotus paste buns, pearl rice porridge, and eggs so precisely salted they taste of the sea. You share these meals with favored ministers, each bite a chance to observe loyalties or hesitations. Remember how, as a girl, you strained to glimpse the older concubines' jeweled hairstyles? Now, your own hairpins sparkle with pearls the size of sparrows' eggs, each one a silent testament to how far you've come. Foreign visitors request audiences almost daily. They bow low on thick Persian carpets imported just to impress them. Some giggle behind fans at the idea of a woman holding such sway. Others stare, eyes wide as you glide across your audience hall, each measured step as deliberate as a general's march. You make a point of hosting banquets so lavish, they're described in Europe as scenes from a fairy tale. Pipa players pluck delicate notes, while acrobats tumble between columns. Tables groan under roasted pheasant, bird's nest soup, and candied fruits sculpted to resemble peonies. Between bites, you test the foreigners with sly questions. How does your queen manage her ministers? Or, would your emperor allow a woman to command armies? Their flustered answers amuse you long after the candles burn low. Mainstream fact: you made an unlikely impression on figures like Sir Robert Hart, head of the Imperial Maritime Customs Service, who described you as astute, witty, and entirely at ease in her power. An image that both fascinated and horrified Western observers. Meanwhile, your private evenings are far from restful. You pore over scrolls of financial ledgers, troop deployments, and letters from provincial governors. Your eyes ache under flickering lanterns, but you refuse to let anyone else interpret these details for you. Remember the secret doors you memorized as a concubine. Now you know every corridor of the imperial bureaucracy just as intimately. Your inner circle shrinks. Empress Qian's sudden death years earlier left you without your co-regent, cementing your unchallenged authority, but also stripping away the last person who understood the strange burden of ruling behind silk screens. A joke flickers through your mind one evening as you sip tea by candlelight. You've outlived so many rivals. You wonder if the Forbidden City itself whispers your name with grudging respect. Historians still argue whether your years of grandeur were a tragic swan song or the high point of your reign. You only know that every silk robe, every midnight council, every swirl of incense is a line written into a legacy you're determined to control. The heat of summer presses down on Beijing like a smothering hand. But the real fire comes from the streets and alleys beyond your palace walls. You hear the chants first as a faint hum carried on dusty winds, then louder. A roar surging through the capital. The Boxer Rebellion has arrived, and with it, the deadliest gamble of your reign. Mainstream historical fact. In 1900, a secret society known as the Righteous and Harmonious Fists, the Boxers, rose in northern China, vowing to expel foreign devils and Christian converts. Their rebellion swept across villages and cities, burning churches and railways, and eventually laying siege to Beijing's foreign legations. Quirkier tidbit? Boxers believed spells scrawled in chicken blood on paper charms could make them impervious to bullets. A conviction you found both absurd and oddly admirable in its unshakable confidence. Historians still argue whether you were the rebellion's secret patron or simply swept along by a movement too big to stop. What you know is this. The Boxers offered a chance to unite China against foreign domination. Yet their fury threatened to destroy everything, including you. In late-night councils, your generals plead for decisive action. Crush the Boxers before foreign armies have an excuse to invade. Others argue that backing the Boxers could channel popular rage against Western powers and restore China's lost prestige. You weigh these paths like a chess master, considering every sacrifice. Remember how you once watched thunderheads gather over palace roofs, awed by their power? Now you see that same unstoppable force in the Boxers' frenzied eyes. At first, you hesitate, sending mixed orders. Local officials are told to support the Boxers quietly, but to avoid open attacks on foreigners. Yet, when Western ambassadors threaten you with ultimatums, your patience snaps. You issue an imperial decree declaring war on all foreign powers, knowing full well you've stepped off a cliff. Mainstream fact, the 8-nation alliance, Britain, France, Germany, Russia, Japan, the US, Austria, Hungary, and Italy, responded with a massive military expedition. Their armies marched on Beijing, determined to break the siege and punish your dynasty. As foreign shells fall like hailstones onto city walls, the Forbidden City quakes with every distant boom. You move between candlelit war councils and frenzied prayers to your ancestors, aware you've unleashed a conflict no one can fully control. Your jokes turn dark. You imagine those Boxers in their red sashes trying to punch cannonballs out of the sky. Yet, behind the sarcasm, you fear the end of a world you've spent a lifetime shaping. Reports arrive of massacres, burned villages, and foreign troops advancing relentlessly. Ministers who once swaggered now weep in your presence. Some propose surrender. Others flee the city outright. Remember your early nights as a frightened concubine. Now, you know fear in a way no child could imagine. Historians still argue whether you intended the war to rally a divided empire or simply misjudged the foreigners' resolve. You sense that victory was always an illusion, but you refuse to surrender on your knees. When Beijing finally falls, you flee with the imperial court in a desperate procession across the dusty plains. You ride a humble donkey cart, cloaked in plain robes to disguise your identity. Peasants you pass hardly believe the Dowager Empress herself rumbles by, eyes fixed on the horizon. Mainstream fact: you escape to Xi'an, hundreds of miles from Beijing, where you spent months regrouping with loyal officials. From there, you negotiated peace terms with the same powers you'd declared war on. At night in Xi'an, you sit on a simple mat under dim lanterns, recalling the lacquered splendor of your palace and the fires that now consume it. You vow to return, not to die in exile like some dethroned monarch, but to reclaim your seat and salvage what you can of the empire. Through each sleepless night, you whisper promises to the spirits of the ancestors and to yourself that you will outlast this catastrophe too. Dust from your flight to Xi'an still clings to your robes when you begin the long, painstaking process of rebuilding what the Boxer Rebellion shattered. The Forbidden City lies looted and scorched. Foreign troops swagger through Beijing streets. And you, Empress Dowager Cixi, must negotiate with the very powers you once defied. Mainstream historical fact: the Boxer Protocol of 1901 imposed harsh terms on China, enormous indemnities, execution of officials deemed complicit, and permanent foreign garrisons stationed in Beijing. Humiliations that left the Qing court reeling. A quirkier tidbit: even as you signed treaties with foreign diplomats in Xi'an, you insisted on maintaining elaborate rituals. You met envoys in pavilions heavy with incense, and once interrupted a tense negotiation because the ceremonial peacock refused to spread its tail. An omen, you claimed, that talks must pause. Historians still argue whether your willingness to sue for peace marked sudden wisdom or sheer desperation. But from your vantage, survival required swallowing pride to preserve the Qing throne, even if it meant bowing to nations you'd once considered barbaric. When you finally returned to Beijing, the city's walls seemed to sag under the weight of recent horrors. The Forbidden City's gates stand open, their mighty timbers scorched, and you feel ghosts in every courtyard. Yet, you force yourself to glide through them with your chin high, knowing your people need to see an empress unbroken. Remember how you once feared the Empress Qian's cool gaze? Now it's foreign generals who avert their eyes first when they meet you. Awed or unsettled by the old woman who defied them and lived, you make a momentous decision. If modernization once seemed a threat, now it becomes your only hope. In your late 70s, you push for a raft of reforms. You order the abolition of the ancient civil service exam system, decreeing that future officials will be trained in modern schools, teaching math, science, and foreign languages alongside Confucian classics. Mainstream fact: these so-called late Qing reforms also included establishing provincial assemblies, plans for a national parliament, and new military academies to train officers in modern warfare. You even approved the first steps toward a constitutional monarchy, imagining an empire that might resemble Japan's Meiji Restoration. Once or when, a gamble that might have worked had time and fortune favored you. Historians still argue whether these reforms came too late, a desperate scramble to forestall collapse, or whether, given another generation, They could have transformed China's fate. Your nights fill with the scratching of brushes on rice paper as you issue decrees that reach every corner of the empire. Couriers race to deliver your commands to distant governors. Telegraph wires hum with your words. In quiet moments, you sit alone in the hall of mental cultivation, the candlelight glinting off dragon carvings. You remember the dreams of your girlhood, when you longed only to survive the concubine selection. Now, you're the last true center of power in an empire older than any foreign dynasty that seeks to dominate it. You invite delegations of Chinese students returning from Japan and Europe to share their ideas. Some talk breathlessly of parliaments, constitutions, and railroads. You listen, eyes narrowed, weighing each word against what you know of China's proud yet fragile traditions. A joke tugs at your lips. Imagine telling your teenage self she'd one day listen to young men wearing European suits, propose laws to limit your own authority. You walk through the gardens of your rebuilt summer palace, lotus blossoms nodding in the breeze sighs. Each step reminds you of both loss and possibility. You resolve to leave behind not just a legend of cunning survival, but a blueprint, even if incomplete, for China's future. As dawn breaks on another day of work, you whisper to yourself, there will be time enough for sleep when the empire no longer depends on your vigilance. The last years of your life unfold with an eerie calm, like the hush that settles after a great storm. Each morning you rise with the sun, knowing your body weakens even as your mind burns with urgency. You are Cixi, the dragon lady, the Empress Dowager who shaped and shielded an empire. But you also sense time slipping through your fingers like fine sand. Mainstream historical fact: you spent your final months issuing rapid-fire edicts, including the creation of new schools, expanded postal services, and decrees promising a constitutional government within 9 years. These efforts, though sweeping on paper, struggled to take root in an empire battered by war and corruption. A quirkier detail? You insisted on riding in a custom-built sedan chair lined with lavender silk and cushioned so thickly your servants joked it could carry you straight to the moon if lifted hard enough. Even in frailty, you never let anyone forget who you were. Historians still argue whether your late-life reforms were a true commitment to modernization or a ploy to pacify reformers while maintaining control. But each night, as you lie awake staring at the carved dragons dancing across your ceiling beams, you know the answer matters less than the fleeting time you have left. You grow reflective. Remember those days as a girl memorizing Confucian classics, longing to be seen beyond your birth rank? Now the entire empire looks to you. Some with hope, some with fear, all wondering how much longer you can keep chaos at bay. In your final weeks, you meet daily with trusted ministers, your voice husky but still commanding. You order food reforms to curb famines and instruct generals to modernize border garrisons. Your fingers tremble when you sign your last edicts, yet you steady them with iron will. Mainstream fact: in 1908, you officially named the 3-year-old Puyi, your great-nephew, as the next emperor, bypassing older potential heirs in a final attempt to keep the dynasty's bloodline intact and ensure a smooth succession. That autumn, your son Guangxu, your adopted child and former prisoner, dies suddenly under mysterious circumstances. Some whisper poison, others stroke their beards and claim fate. You attend his funeral with solemn poise, knowing historians will forever debate your role in his death. You think back to the crocodile dung sunscreen your nurse once smeared on your face to keep your skin pale, to your first glimpse of the emperor's frown, to nights when you sang lullabies to a son who would one day be emperor himself. Every memory gleams like a lantern swaying over dark water. As your health fails, you ask to be carried one last time through the Forbidden City's echoing halls. You study each dragon-carved arch, each fading mural of phoenixes and warriors. Eunuchs sniffle as they support your sedan chair. Old handmaidens whisper prayers. The empire's ancient stones seem to hum with memories of your triumphs and missteps. Historians still argue whether your death ended an era or simply removed the last obstacle to revolution. But as you breathe in the scent of cedar smoke and dried chrysanthemum drifting through the halls, you sense the future already stirring beyond your control. The morning you slip into unconsciousness, you dream of plum blossoms falling on frozen courtyards. Your last thoughts are of a china you struggle to guide, terrified it might shatter without you, yet stubbornly proud of the legacy you carved with every breath. Now, as our long journey through moonlit corridors and sun-dappled pavilions draws to a close, you feel the weight of centuries slowly lifting. The frantic hoofbeats of rival armies and the rustle of silk robes fade into the soft hush of night. Your breath settles, deep and even, as if the slow rise and fall of your chest mirrors the ancient rhythms of the empire itself. Imagine standing under a star-strewn sky above the Forbidden City. The last whispers of the dragon throne slipping into the cool breeze. The lanterns flicker like sleepy fireflies, their warm glow casting gentle patterns across stone courtyards. Somewhere in the distance, a bamboo flute sighs a final note that drifts through darkened gardens, lingering like a lullaby meant just for you. You picture the walls of the summer palace reflected in still waters, moonlight painting the marble boat in silver. The air is sweet with the scent of night-blooming jasmine, petals opening with each measured exhale you release. Feel your limbs grow heavy, your heartbeat calm. Each moment of the story settling in your mind like a pebble finding its place in a quiet pond. Let the images of Empress Dowager Cixi's life, the triumphs and regrets, the feasts and exiles, blur softly at the edges. Allow the world beyond your room to drift away until all that remains is the soft cadence of your breath and the promise of deep, restful sleep. Tonight, you've walked among emperors and empresses, but now it's time to let dreams carry you gently beyond their vanished halls. Sweet dreams.